I opened my eyes and for a second, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if God had finally taken pity on me, because I was lying in the exact same bedroom in Maplewood, Ohio, where everything went to hell the first time. The faded curtains were still blowing in the morning breeze, and outside I could hear the village kids laughing and yelling about lollipops and wedding candy, just like that cursed morning when my husband, Bob Miller, sold our daughter Lily off to marry a fool. My hands were shaking as I sat up in bed. My forehead still throbbities. The scab was there, from when Bob hit me with a stool the night I tried to stop the wedding. And then it hit me. I wasn't dreaming. I was back. Reborn. The day my life and, more importantly, Lily's life was destroyed in my previous life was playing out all over again, and this time, I wasn't going to be the powerless, gullible housewife I used to be. In that life, Bob lied to me. He told me Lily had run away from home when she refused to marry that deranged son of the Zachary family. He pocketed the dowry from the Zacharys and used it to pave the way for Linda Monroe's daughter, Samantha, to marry into a powerful family in Springfield. While Samantha got fancy dresses and became a rich man's wife, my Lily was chained up in a basement, beaten until her skin had no good flesh left on it, and tortured by her in-laws until she died wrapped in a torn mattress and dumped into a ravine like trash. I jumped into the river that day because I couldn't live with the guilt. But now I had a second chance. And the first thing I did was run into Lily's room and hug her like I never had before. Her voice trembled when she said, "Mom, are you okay? You've been crying all morning." She looked perfectly fine. No bruises, no broken bones. Her eyes were full of worry, not pain. That's when the tears burst out of me and I sobbed so hard I could barely breathe. I was really, truly back. "As long as you're awake, Mom," Lily whispered, "I'll marry whoever they say. Just don't cry anymore." That broke me even more. In my last life, I fought Bob over the arranged marriage. I begged. I threatened to die. He hit me, called me hysterical, told me not to ruin Samantha's future by making a scene. He said our daughter was just a country girl and didn't deserve more than to be married off like livestock. But this time, he wasn't getting a damn penny from Lily's dowry. I stormed into the living room, grabbed the red wedding dress they had laid out for her, and threw it into the yard before lighting it on fire. The flames roared, and I didn't even flinch. Without Lily's wedding and the money that came with it, I wanted to see how Linda and Samantha would pay their way into Springfield high society. Outside, I heard giggling. Kids shouting insults like, "Lily's gonna marry a fool. She's gonna have a bunch of dumb babies. Uncle Bob says she's just lucky someone wants her." And I swear I almost lost it. Lily stood next to me, looking so embarrassed, apologizing for things that weren't her fault, and I wanted to rip the entire world apart for making her feel like that. Then Linda Monroe waltzed into my yard with that smug face and fake sympathy dripping off her voice. She took my hand, pretending to comfort me, and said, "Grace, I know the groom's a little off, but his family's got money, right? For a small-town girl like Lily, that's a huge win." I stared her down cold and asked, "If it's such a great match, why don't you marry Samantha off to him instead?" You should have seen her face like she swallowed a wasp. And before she could say anything, Samantha pranced into our house without knocking, strutting around in a new red and blue checkered dress, sneering at everything. "No TV, not even a fan? This place is basically a shack," she muttered. "And you expect someone from the Zachary family to live like this?" Meanwhile, my Lily stood there in a pair of my old clothes, looking like she was wearing someone else's past. Bob came stomping in after them, and when he saw the scorched remains of the wedding dress, he completely lost it. "Grace Thompson, do you know how much that dress cost?" he shouted. Of course I knew. He bought it at a second-hand stall for $4, and the cheap thing wasn't even worth as much as the hair clip Samantha had in her hair. But once upon a time, Bob had been good to me. When we were sent down to the countryside together, and I got sick from the cold, he used to carry me to the health center in the snow. I believed him when he said he'd bring me to Springfield once he got a job at the steel plant. But then his letters started changing. They became more about Linda and Samantha. Excuses. Delays. One day, he just stopped writing. By the time he returned, it wasn't to take me and Lily to a better life, it was to drag Lily to the Zachary family's door like she was a sacrificial offering. All because Samantha got pregnant by the son of some big-shot politician, and the boy's parents wouldn't let her marry him unless she had a proper job. So Bob planned to use Lily's dowry to buy Samantha a position at Midwest Textile Company. That's why when I burned that dress, Linda nearly fainted. She stammered something about ruining their plans, and just as I turned around, someone snarled behind me, "You took the money already. Think the Zatcharies are just here for the view?" The groomsmen had arrived with drums, gongs, and enough arrogance to fill a stadium. The groom, that idiot, leered at Samantha like she was a side dish. Bob jumped in front of her, shielding her like she was some innocent flower. "Go get Lily," he barked at me. "Get her on the damn bridal sit-in." But I just stood there, frozen. He lunged for Lily, trying to drag her out of the house. She clung to me, sobbing. I held onto her as tightly as I could. He growled, "It doesn't matter who she marries. The Zatcharies have money. She'll live well." Yeah, well. In my last life, that good life, included her being burned with hot irons, locked in a basement, her legs broken, her dignity shredded, and eventually her life ended. And Bob never lifted a finger to help. Not even when I begged him on my knees. Why would the Zatcharies do that, he'd scoffed. Maybe if Lily had behaved better. Maybe if you raised her right. That's when I realized I couldn't reason with him. So this time I wouldn't. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "If you try to take my daughter again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." And judging by the flicker of fear in his eyes, he finally realized something had changed. Because I wasn't the Grace he used to bully anymore. I was a mother back from the grave. And I was ready for war. Linda's smug little face twitched when I stood my ground like that, and for once, she didn't know what to say. She darted her eyes to Bob like he was her human shield, but even he looked a little stunned that I wasn't backing down or sobbing like I usually did. Samantha, though God, Samantha, she didn't waste a beat. That girl waltzed in, hands on hips, flipping her shiny curls, and practically shouted, "You know what? My mom is right. I mean, Lily should be grateful. She's just a backwoods bumpkin. Marrying into the Zachary family? That's the best she'll ever do. You think some other rich family is going to pick her?" And then she had the nerve to look me up and down like I was some mold growing on the wall and added, "Besides, look at this dump. Your walls are cracked, your floors are dirt, and you don't even have a single fan. Do you even own a real mirror?" She turned on her heel and twirled that red and blue dress like she was on a runway, while Lily stood next to me in one of my hand-me-downs, 16 years old and barely able to look anyone in the eye. Bob was still huffing and puffing about the wedding dress I'd burned. That was $4 whole, Grace. Do you think money grows on trees? And I could barely stop myself from laughing at how pathetic he sounded. $4. He spent more on Samantha's cheap little rhinestone clip than he did on the dress he expected my daughter to get married in. But I didn't say that. I said, loud enough for everyone in the yard to hear, "If this marriage is so great, why isn't Samantha marrying into the Zachary family instead?" And that was it. The mood turned icy in a split second. Bob's eyes darted toward the villagers gathering outside our fence, ears perked up like it was their weekend entertainment. He tried to change the subject, started mumbling something about how I was embarrassing him in front of everyone, but it was too late. The seed was planted. One of the neighbor kids yelled, "Hey, why doesn't the pretty one go instead? Ain't she the favorite?" And the laughter that followed was bitter and sharp. Linda tried to laugh it off, but her hands were trembling. Samantha looked like she wanted to slap someone. I could feel the tide turning, so I pressed on. "You want to know what's really going on here?" I shouted, turning to the crowd. "Bob Miller doesn't care about Lily. He's selling his own daughter just to get Samantha a job in Springfield so she can marry that government boy who knocked her up." Linda gasped and clutched her chest like she was in a soap opera. "Sister-in-law," she squealed. "How can you say that in front of the children?" But I wasn't done. "Oh, save it, Linda. You and Bob used Lily's betrothal money to buy that chunky gold bracelet on your wrist. Want proof? Here's the receipt." I marched into the house, grabbed the old bill from under the sewing machine drawer, and waved it in the air. "You want to see how much it cost? $200. 200 while my daughter was supposed to get married in a thrift shop dress and beaten like a dog in some stranger's basement." That's when the murmur started. The crowd began passing the receipt around, and I watched as their faces changed one by one. These were women like me. Women who'd been cheated, silenced, overlooked.
They saw what I saw now.
The aunts started whispering to each other. Didn't Bob only send her, like, $50 a year? But he's got money for gold bracelets. Another one piped up. And why's Linda still living with her brother-in-law anyway? That's weird, isn't it? The momentum was mine now, and I wasn't about to let go. You want to talk about shame, Bob? I said, staring him dead in the eye. What's shameful is forcing your daughter into a house where she'll be tortured just so your mistress's child can live in comfort. His face twisted in rage, and I swear he looked like he was going to hit me again. But then Linda made her move. She threw on her best weepy voice, touched her stomach, and said, "If Lily won't marry then, I guess we have no choice. Samantha will have to suffer." It was all an act, and I saw it instantly.
But Bob?
He fell for it like the fool he was. "That's enough," he barked at me. "This isn't about your feelings, Grace. This is about trust. We already took the Zatry's money. We can't just back out now. People will talk. Samantha's future will be ruined." And then, just like in the last life, he grabbed me hard, trying to rip Lily out of my arms. I fought with everything I had. He twisted my hand until I heard the sickening snap of bone, and my vision went white with pain. But I didn't let go. Even as I screamed and felt the sweat run cold down my back, I held Lily tighter. She was sobbing. "Mom, please let go."
I'll go.
"I'll marry him. Just don't let Dad hit you again." It ripped me apart. But even in the middle of that chaos, Linda leaned in close, pretending to comfort me while sneering, "Come on, Grace, just give up. It's not like you're going to raise her to be anyone special. Girls grow up and get married, it's just the way things go." I looked at the bracelet again, glittering in the sunlight, and that's when I had enough. "You want to know the truth?" I yelled to everyone. "Linda got that bracelet thanks to the blood of my daughter. Bob took the Zatry's money, not me. If anyone owes them a bride, it's Samantha." That shut them all up. Even the Zatrys stopped grinning when they heard that. Their sleazy eldest son looked Samantha up and down, and actually licked his lips. "Well now, if this one's still available," he muttered. Bob jumped between them faster than I'd ever seen him move. "Don't even look at her," he shouted. "She's not part of the deal." "Yeah, because the precious princess couldn't marry a brute, but my Lily could? Not today. Not ever again." The tension was so thick it could have snapped. I clutched my broken hand and took a shaky breath. "You'll have to kill me first," I said quietly, "because I'd rather die than let you sell my child like livestock." And that's when the real show began. The crowd exploded. People yelling, fingers pointing, some screaming at Bob, some at Linda, some even at the Zatrys. The village women were especially vocal, some crying, some spitting on the ground in disgust. But Bob wasn't done being a monster. "You want a scene?" he hissed. "I'll give you a scene." And then God help Mayhay dragged me down, shoved my face to the ground, and forced me to kneel in front of Linda. "Apologize to her," he screamed. "Apologize for ruining this family's future." My head slammed against a sharp stone, and blood ran down my face into my eyes, blinding me. Linda and Samantha giggled like witches over a fire while I bled into the dirt. Then I heard Lily scream. He was dragging her too. I couldn't see, but I knew what was happening. He was pushing her toward the Zatrys, toward that damned carriage. "She's 16, I shouted. "She should be in school, not locked up and tortured by some psycho family. She's your daughter, Bob. She's yours." And that's when something in me snapped. Because I remembered. I remembered how he used to lift her into the air when she was a baby, how she laughed when he spun her around, how she cried for him when he left. And now here he was, ready to sacrifice her future just to secure another woman's child's marriage. I stood, shaking, and wiped the blood from my eyes. I didn't care about dignity anymore. I didn't care about shame. All I cared about was saving my daughter, and if I had to burn every last bridge and fight the whole world to do it, then so be it. I was ready. When I say something in me snapped, I mean it in the most terrifying way. I felt the pain, the fear, the humiliation melt into this raw, relentless heat in my chest, and I don't even remember how I got up from the ground, how I shoved Linda and Samantha off me like they weighed nothing, how I grabbed Bob by the collar and hissed into his face with every ounce of fury I had buried for years. "If you so much as touch Lily again, I swear to God, I will burn everything you care about to ash, including that steel job, that golden brat, and your reputation with those damn Zacharies." And for a moment, everyone around me went silent like the whole universe had sucked in its breath. Even Bo blinked like he couldn't believe what he was seeing, because I wasn't the quiet, obedient wife who boiled his tea and mended his socks anymore. I was the mother who had died once and come back just to protect her daughter. And when he tried to laugh it off like, "Grace, you're being dramatic, we've been married for 10 years. How could you say this?" I didn't flinch, I didn't back down. I just stared at him and said, "You might be Lily's father, but you're not her family." And in that instant, I saw something flicker behind his eyes: regret. Maybe, or maybe just fear. But it didn't matter because I knew if I didn't act now, if I didn't run now, they'd take her, and I'd lose her again. So when the Zachary men turned to grab her, I did the only thing I could. I screamed, grabbed Lily by the wrist, and shoved her through the back door of the house, yelling at the top of my lungs, "Run, baby, run." And thank God she did, because I was right behind her, bolting through the fields, ignoring the pain in my broken finger, the blood dripping from my forehead, the shouting behind us, the drums still beating like war, and I didn't stop, didn't look back, because I knew if we got caught, there'd be no second chance this time. They'd drag us back and lock Lily in that same basement, and I'd lose her again, and I couldn't survive that a second time. So we cut through the edge of the woods behind old Mr. Hawkins' barn, the same trail I used to take as a kid when I skipped school to pick wild berries, and every branch that scratched my legs, every stone that jabbed my foot, every sting of cold air reminded me that this wasn't a dream. This was real, and we were really getting away. And just when my lungs were about to give up and Lily stumbled from exhaustion, I saw a familiar tractor chugging along the narrow path and nearly burst into tears when I realized it was Aunt Maggie, the only person in the village who had dared to speak up for me earlier. And when she saw our bruises and our terrified faces, she didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. She pulled us into the trailer bed and threw a bunch of old hay and plastic sheets over us, whispering, "Don't make a sound, not even a breath. I'll get you to the highway." And I squeezed her hand so tight, I thought I'd break her fingers, and just kept mouthing, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," as she drove, bumping along the dirt road toward salvation. And by the time we got to the main road heading towards Springfield, the sun was starting to set, and I was shaking from a combination of adrenaline and fear. And when she finally stopped and helped us out of the trailer, she shoved $5 into my hand and said, "Grace, we women gotta look out for each other. Now go start over, and don't let him find you." And I cried harder than I had in years because I didn't deserve her kindness, but I clung to it like a lifeline, and we stood at the edge of the highway, just me and Lily, two broken girls with nothing but a few bruises, a half-ripped backpack, and the will to survive, watching the traffic zoom by and wondering how in the world we were going to rebuild from scratch. But I reminded myself I had cooking skills, I had grit, and I had something Bob and Linda would never understand: the fire that comes from being a mother who refuses to fail her child twice. So we walked, street to street, block to block in Springfield, asking restaurants if they needed a cook, getting rejected over and over again, because apparently having a kid with you made people nervous, like I was bringing trouble instead of talent, until finally, this one little diner at the corner of Oak and Lincoln Parker's diner gave me a shot. The owner, Mrs. Parker, looked me up and down, asked if I could cook Midwest-style home dishes, and I said, "Give me one burner and 5 minutes and you'll be begging me to stay." And she laughed like she didn't believe me, but let me try anyway, and I whipped up the best chicken pot pie and garlic mashed potatoes of my life, shaking the whole time because everything, literally everything, depended on this moment. And when she took the first bite and her eyes lit up like she'd seen Jesus himself, I knew we were going to be okay, because she not only gave me the job, she let Lily and me sleep in the back storage room of the diner, which might have been a cramped little utility closet to someone else, but to us, it was the most beautiful room in the world because it meant we were safe. It meant we could sleep without fear. It meant no one could chain Lily up in a basement ever again. And that night, after scrubbing pans and wiping counters until my hands ached, I sat on the cold floor beside Lily's makeshift bed and whispered, "We're going to be all right, sweetheart, I promise." And she looked at me with those big tired eyes and said, "I believe you, Mom." And I couldn't help it. I started crying again, soft tears this time, grateful ones, because even if we had nothing, we had each other, and that was more than I ever had in my last life. and I thought, maybe this time I really can rewrite our ending. Maybe this time I won't let the villains win. I honestly thought we had escaped them. Like, really escaped. Like, maybe they were finally gone from our lives, swallowed up by the dust of Maplewood, left behind in the smoke of the burned wedding dress and the trail we carved through the woods. But fate has a sick sense of humor, because one Thursday afternoon, I was in Parker's diner, hair tied back, apron on, working the lunch rush like I always did, wiping sweat from my brow as I carried a steaming bowl of beef stew to table 3, and just as I set it down, I heard it hat voice, that horrible voice that used to haunt my dreams, dripping with condescension and entitlement. Well, if it isn't Grace Thompson, still doing the dirty work, huh? And I turned around slowly, praying my ears were lying to me, but there they were, sitting at the table like they owned the place. Bob Miller and Linda Monroe, acting like this was some casual lunch spot for respectable folks, and not the scene of the life they tried to destroy. And before I could even process the bile rising in my throat, Samantha flounced in right behind them, flipping her curls like she was auditioning for a teen soap opera and sneering at everything from the menu to the silverware to the chairs. And I froze, because what the hell were they doing here in Springfield, in my diner, in my space, where Lily and I had finally started breathing again? And just as I was about to walk away, pretending I didn't even see them, Samantha slammed her chopsticks down like a brat and snapped, "What kind of waitress are you? You look gross and your food smells worse, ugh. No wonder nobody eats here." And I swear, I almost dropped the pot of soup I was holding, not because I was shocked by her behavior, but because I was fighting every instinct I had not to flip the whole tray in her smug little face. And then Linda, always the fake saint, clutched her pearls and said, Now, Samantha, don't be so harsh. She is still your aunt after all." And Samantha rolled her eyes and said, "Only because she ran away and ruined our entire family. If that pathetic daughter of hers had just married into the Zachary family like she was supposed to, none of this would have happened." And I couldn't hold it in anymore. I laughed, loud and bitter and sharp enough to slice glass, because wow, imagine being so delusional that you blame your own crimes on the people you victimized. And I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You mean if I had let my daughter be tortured so you could marry your baby daddy without anyone asking why a jobless teen was already showing? Is that what you mean, Samantha?" And she turned red, like actually red, and sputtered, "You don't know anything about our situation." And I said, "Oh, honey, I know everything, because you couldn't shut up about it even when you were robbing us blind." And right as I turned to leave, not wanting to make a scene that would drag Mrs. Parker into this, Linda suddenly let out this dramatic gasp, stumbled back like I'd slapped her, and fell to the floor with the fakest sob I've ever seen, muttering, "If hitting me makes you feel better, Grace, then go ahead and do it again. I deserve it for trying to fix your daughter's life." And I blinked so hard I thought my eyes might fall out, because I hadn't touched her, hadn't even gotten near her. And yet here she was, flopping on the linoleum and crying like she was the one who got dragged through a forced marriage. And of course, Bob jumped up like some chivalrous idiot and shoved me hard in the shoulder, shouting, "What is your problem, Grace? We came here to reconcile, and this is how you act?" Always the drama queen. And that was it, the last straw, because now I wasn't just a waitress trying to survive. I was a mother who had worked too damn hard to let these people step on me again. And before I could even think about what to do next, Bob reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a crumpled $10 bill, and tossed it at my feet like it was a bone to a dog, saying, "Here, take this and get lost. Take Lily and go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. We don't need you." Embarrassing us in front of Samantha's future in-laws. And that's when everything inside me went still, like the calm before a storm, because I realized they weren't just here to eat, they were hosting Samantha's engagement lunch at my diner, the place I scrubbed every morning, the kitchen where Lily and I finally found some peace. And the audacity of that made me smile, really smile, because if they were dumb enough to walk into my territory thinking I'd just serve them soup and let them ruin my life all over again, then they clearly didn't understand who they were messing with anymore. So I picked up the money, smiled sweetly, and said, "Of course, Mr. Miller, I'll take care of everything." And then I walked straight into the kitchen, heart pounding with adrenaline and fire, and told Mrs. Parker everything from start to finish. And you know what? She didn't even blink. She just leaned back in her chair, cracked open a sunflower seed, and said, "I hate men like that. Go ahead and tear the place apart if you want. Anything you break is mine, and I've got more in storage. but make sure you humiliate them properly. And I could have kissed her, because I was already imagining the scene I was about to cause, already planning how I'd use their own arrogance against them, because I wasn't just going to kick them out, I was going to ruin Samantha's engagement in front of every single person they were trying to impress. And when the future in-laws finally showed up, all pearls and pressed suits and noses in the air, I watched Bob and Linda trip over themselves to pour water and flatter them, watch Samantha bat her eyelashes and talk about how hard it's been since Daddy lost his job, but love conquers all, and I bided my time, waiting for the exact moment to strike. And when the introductions were made, when the fancy guests were seated, I dragged Lily out front with me, stood right in the center of the dining room, and dropped to my knees like some tragic widow and wailed, "Please give me my husband back. My daughter can't be without her father. Linda's already had him for 5 years, hasn't she had enough?" And you could have heard a pin drop, because the entire restaurant froze, eyes wide, mouths open, jaws practically on the floor, and the future in-laws looked like someone had dumped acid into their wine, and Bob turned white as a sheet, whispering, "What the hell are you doing?" And I cried even louder. "I've been raising our child alone in the countryside while you played family with your dead brother's wife. How can you call yourself a man?" And I could see the judgment settling into the future in-laws' faces like ink soaking into paper, and I thought, yes, now you feel what I felt, because this wasn't just a scene, it was justice, public and loud and unignorable, and this wasn't even the climax yet. Oh no, because next I was going to flip the whole damn table. I didn't even have to flip the table, me words were enough to flip their entire world upside down, because as I knelt there with tears streaking my face and my voice cracking like a desperate, heartbroken wife clinging to her cheating husband, every set of eyes in that diner zeroed in on Bob and Linda like heat-seeking missiles, and Samantha's smug little face drained of color so fast she looked like she was about to faint. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot, so I dragged Lily forward in front of the whole crowd, cupped her face gently, and sobbed, "This is the daughter he abandoned in Maplewood for 5 years, the daughter he tried to sell into a nightmare just so this woman—" I pointed a trembling finger at Linda, who was frozen in place like a taxidermy statue, "could marry her daughter into Springfield high society." And at that moment, the murmurs exploded into full-on chaos. The fiancé's parents whispering furiously to each other, looking more and more horrified with every passing second, especially when I stood up and announced in a clear, ringing voice, he didn't even come home for his mother's funeral, but he made sure to come back just in time to drag Lily to the Zachary's and pocket the dowry to cover Samantha's pregnancy, and that one landed like a grenade, because the fiancé's father flinched, stood up, and hissed, "She's pregnant," loud enough for half the room to hear, and Samantha, who clearly thought she was untouchable, tried to grab his hand with this cutesy little whimper, but he shoved her away so hard she almost tripped over her own heels, and I'll admit, I felt a guilty little thrill in my chest watching that moment unfold, because karma, my dear, always comes back with a vengeance, and Linda, realizing her golden goose was slipping away, sprang into action, falling to her knees and wailing, "It's not what you think. She's just a little early, but she's a good girl, a really good girl." And Bob, finally panicking, spun around and pointed at me like a madman, yelling, "You liar. You ruined everything. She's just jealous. She's always been jealous." And I laughed, honest to God laughed like I was watching the best comedy show of my life, and I said, "Jealous?
Of you?
Bob, you forced your daughter into a living hell and sold your soul for a promotion, and now you're crying about consequences? Sweetheart, this is what accountability looks like." And then I picked up the half-finished soup from their table, the same one Samantha had insulted 10 minutes ago, and splashed it right across her fancy cream blouse, and she screamed like she was being murdered, clutching her chest like hot soup was acid, and while she was distracted, I kicked her to the floor and turned to Linda, who looked like she was about to make a run for it. But I wasn't done yet, not even close, because I launched myself at her, pinned her down like a linebacker, and slapped her across the face 3 times, the sound echoing through the restaurant like fireworks, and I shouted, "This is for stealing my husband. This is for mocking my child. And this is for standing by while my daughter was nearly destroyed." And the whole diner was so quiet you could hear someone chewing ice in the back, except for Samantha, who was sobbing, curled up on the tile like her whole world had ended, which, honestly, it had. And when she tried to get up and reach for her fiancé again, he looked at her like she was dirt on his shoe and snapped, "Don't touch me. before turning to his parents and saying, "Let's Dowry not marrying into the circus." And the way Bob's mouth dropped open was priceless, like a man who'd just watched the last rope of his lifeboat snap. And the moment they stormed out, everyone else in the diner followed some out of curiosity, some just to get away from the tension. But no one looked at Bob with respect anymore, not even the people who used to suck up to him. And then he did what cowards always do when Corneret turned on me like I was the villain, spitting out curses, lunging forward. But before he could even get close, Mrs. Parker marched out of the kitchen, rolled up her sleeves, and slapped him twice so hard it echoed off the diner walls, then crossed her arms and said, "You don't get to scream at my staff, you spineless rat." And Bob froze, too stunned to even speak, and I swear it was the first time in years he actually looked small, like a little man whose big mouth finally got him in a mess he couldn't talk his way out of. And Mrs. Parker wasn't done. She turned to the crowd and shouted, "This man abandoned his wife and daughter in a falling-apart shack for 5 years while playing happy family with his dead brother's widow, and now he wants to act like he's some respectable citizen? Get out of my diner before I call the cops." And Linda tried to save face, whining, "This isn't fair. We're being attacked," but no one was listening anymore. And then the fiancé's mother, who'd quietly doubled back to whisper in my ear, said, "Thank you for exposing them. You saved my son from disaster." And I nodded politely, still shaking a little. But inside, my heart was soaring because for the first time in a long time, justice wasn't just a word, it was something I could see and touch and taste. And after Bob and Linda finally slinked out of the diner like raccoons caught raiding a trash can, Mrs. Parker turned to me and said, "I like you even more now. Want to help manage the new branch I'm opening across town?" And I swear, I nearly cried again, but instead I grabbed Lily's hand and whispered, "We made it, baby, we really made it." Because I knew this was just the beginning of a brand new life. But oh, it was a good beginning. And the best part? The fallout hadn't even truly started yet, because the man Bob was trying to impress, the one who'd promised him a promotion, wasn't going to take this scandal quietly, and I couldn't wait to watch that domino fall next. I thought watching Samantha's engagement implode would be the climax, but life had one more twist prepared, because just a few days after they stumbled out of Parker's diner with soup on their clothes and their reputations in ruins, word started spreading fast, like wildfire through Springfield's tight little power circles, and apparently, Samantha's ex-fiancé's parents weren't the type to just let public humiliation go. They filed an anonymous complaint with the Provincial Labor Bureau about Bob's moral conduct, and when that didn't move fast enough for them, they went straight to the top and pulled strings through some official connections that had Bob fired from his cushy management job at Springfield Steelworks within 48 hours, and not just him, every person he had sneakily brought into the company under the table. Every name he vouched for, every personal favor he cashed in, all of it was exposed and cleaned out like rotting garbage. And I swear, I didn't even have to lift a finger. I just sat back in the corner booth of the diner with Lily, sipping coffee while reading the morning paper that said local plant manager removed after ethics review. And my only regret was that the article didn't include a photo of his face. But the fallout didn't stop there, because the village back in Maplewood turned against him too. Mr. Jenkins, our greasy old village chief who once accepted bribes and looked the other way when Bob tried to sell off Lily, started panicking, knocking on Bob's door demanding he fulfill some job placement promises for his good-for-nothing son. And when Bob couldn't deliver, Mr. Jenkins reportedly went around town dragging his name through the mud, saying Bob was a fraud who used the villagers as pawns. And suddenly all the people who had once said, "Well, maybe Grace was exaggerating," started whispering, "Maybe Grace was right." And as if karma was keeping a personal scorecard, the Zachary family, the same brutal in-laws who had once locked Lily in a cellar and beat her like an animal, decided to cash in their previous deal with Bob by showing up and demanding a bride. Again, only this time, he didn't have Lily to offer. So he did the unthinkable, gave them Samantha, and I'm not making this up. He actually convinced Linda to marry her off to that cursed house in exchange for hush money and protection from legal backlash. And when I heard about it from Aunt Maggie, who still sent me letters from Maplewood, I felt a strange mix of horror and satisfaction, because Samantha, for all her cruelty, had no idea what that house was really like. She thought the Zacharys were rich and traditional, but she didn't know about the chains in the basement, the locked doors, the psychotic father-in-law, the iron poker that had once seared Lily's skin. And when I asked Aunt Maggie if she was sure it was true, she said she'd seen it with her own eyes. Samantha dragged away in a bright red dress, screaming, kicking, her mascara running down her face, and Bob standing there with a blank stare like he was already somewhere else. And it made sense because not long after that, the last domino fell. Linda, completely unhinged, poisoned Bob during one of his secret talks with Mr. Jenkins, spiked his tea, and then set fire to the entire back shed where they were sitting, burning both herself and Bob alive in one final act of revenge and desperation. And when I got the letter from Aunt Maggie describing the scene, I just stood there in the kitchen of Parker's diner, holding it with both hands, and said nothing for a long time, just stared out the window. Not because I was sad, but because I realized I finally felt peace. Not the kind of peace where everything's perfect, but the kind where the storm has passed and you're still standing, even if your clothes are torn and your hands are shaking. And I looked over at Lily, who was doing her homework at the counter, and I smiled because no matter what came next, we were safe, we were free, and the people who tried to destroy us had been swallowed by the same darkness they threw us into. And speaking of Lily, beautiful, brilliant girl, she didn't just survive. She thrived, working part-time at the diner while studying at night. And when the acceptance letter from Columbia University came in the summer of 1982, I think I screamed louder than she did. We both cried, hugging each other in the middle of our tiny apartment above the diner, reading and rereading every word of that letter like it was a fairy tale come true. And when she boarded the bus for New York that fall, I stood at the station waving like a lunatic, holding back tears and promising I'd visit soon. And now, looking back, I think about all the things that could have broken us: poverty, betrayal, abuse, public shame, but none of them did, because we had something stronger than all of that. We had love, the kind that fights and bleeds and burns when it has to, and in the end, that love gave us a second life. Not just mine, but Lily's too, and I'll never stop being grateful for that twist of fate that let me wake up again on the day it all began. Because that fire I lit wasn't just for a wedding dress, it was for every lie, every bruise, every stolen choice, and I'd do it all again if it meant saving my daughter one more time, because I'm not just a mother, I'm a warrior, a survivor, and this time, the story didn't end with us broken, it ended with us reborn.